Hello. Welcome back to my channel. I am Monet and you are watching Life is Monet. Happy Black History Month to all of you out there that are celebrating. In this video, I'm going to talk about a few books that I think you should put on your TBR to fit in before Black History Month is over. One of the things that kind of saddens my heart when I read from Black authors, especially during Black History Month, is the amount of books that contain a heavy amount of trauma and racism and just impacts of slavery, and it just becomes a month filled with traumatic, triggering experiences. This is no gripe against those are very important books, but it gets kind of overwhelming and like mentally and emotionally exhausting to constantly read books that are about that. And so I decided to do a recommendation video that consists of books by Black authors telling Black stories that is outside of that doesn't necessarily focus on that, and that is not the driving force of this story. There are so many books out there that you can read by Black authors that are not as triggering as the ones that are mainstream promoted. And since we are only in the middle of this month, I highly recommend that you guys check out some of the books I'm going to mention in this video because I enjoyed all of them. And if you stayed towards the end of this video, I'm going to mention some books that I plan to read hopefully before this month is over, but if not, I will be fitting them in before the year is up. So the first two books I want to mention are actually middle grade books, and I read both of these in a vlog that I posted earlier this month that I will link in the cards above. I thoroughly enjoyed both of these books. I gave them both 5 stars. So the first book is going to be From the Desk of Zoe Washington, and the second one is A Soft Place to Land. These are perfect books for you to fit in before the month is out, to read something that's quick and fun and endearing, and also perfect gifts for any young Black readers that you have in your life. So in From the Desk of Zoe Washington, we are following this character by the name of Zoe, and she has a pretty normal life. Her mom is married to her stepdad. They have a pretty stable marriage. She has her grandmother in her life, and she loves to bake. One day, Zoe gets a letter from her biological father who is in prison, and she has never talked to him before, never met him. She just knows that her biological father went to prison for murder, and her mom said that basically he was guilty, and she just went on living her life. But when Zoe reads this letter, she discovers that the way that he sounds in the letter is actually very sweet and welcoming, and he sounds like such a nice person, and she is just curious and intrigued, and so she writes him a letter back, and Zoe starts this correspondence with this person that she has never met. But at some point in the book, she starts to question, how can such a nice person, such a loving person, be sent to jail for such a heinous crime? And I felt like this book had such a perfect ending, and I just loved the journey that Zoe went on, the character development that she went on, because she's just a 12-year-old girl and she's being exposed to things in her life that doesn't necessarily make sense, and adults are pretty much just giving her open and shut answers, but she has like such this deep curiosity that, you know, she's like, I don't know, that doesn't necessarily sound like a solid answer, so we're gonna do some research. And then we have A Soft Place to Land, where we are following a character by the name of Joy. Joy's father has lost his job, and they have pretty much had to sell their house to stay afloat. And this is the only house that Joy has ever lived in. She loves this house, and they have to move kind of to this crowded neighborhood, and they have to live in an apartment complex, and she's nervous about making friends. Joy's also 12 years old, by the way, and Joy is just pretty much sad and overwhelmed with the things that are happening in her life because she doesn't understand why there's such drastic changes that are happening. In this apartment complex, they have this little hangout spot where she meets some friends and she starts to hang out with them, but someone writes on the wall of this hangout spot that they were basically having a hard time with life and a hard time going on, and Joy just feels this compulsive need to help them, and so they start this correspondence writing on the wall with one another, and Joy is like determined to figure out who this person is that is so depressed and how she can help them. And she pretty much just puts aside and sets aside the things that she has going on in her life. I love the depiction of grief and loss, and just it was done so perfect for a middle grade level, and I would highly recommend this book. Now, of course, I cannot do a recommendation video without bringing up Excuse Me While I Ugly Cry. This is a book that I read last year and completely fell in love with. I love Quinn. I loved her character journey in this book as well, and there's also a really cute romance in this book. So Quinn is a senior in high school, and she is stressed out. She has anxiety, and sometimes she just gets completely overwhelmed. One of the ways that she copes with things that are stressing her out and causing her anxiety is to write them in a journal, and she kind of just creates this lists of things I need to do before I graduate, the list of things that I am avoiding, the list of things that I want to say to my dad but can't, random lists that she just kind of puts into this notebook. One day her notebook gets switched with a classmate by the name of Carter, and she is in a rush to get this notebook back, but somehow he ends up losing it as well. And so someone in the school has her notebook, and they use this list to basically blackmail her into confirming some of the things that she has literally been putting off. And so ultimately Quinn and Carter have to team up to figure out who is using her notebook to blackmail her. Next up, I have an adult fantasy, and that is going to be Son of the Storm. In Son of the Storm, we have this character by the name of Donso. Donso lives in this civilization, and he is a scholar, but he is kind of enraptured with studying the forbidden things and just diving deep into the secrets and the histories and like almost like conspiracy theories, because what his republic and his current government is telling him is that certain types of magic and just civilizations of people no longer exist and sometimes never existed. And one day he comes across a person who is wielding the same magic that his republic has told him was non-existent. He knows that he has kind of been lied to, and he is now on the hunt for the truth. He wants to learn more about this magic, and he also wants to know what happened in the past. A decent installation into a new series. Donzo is a character that I felt very compelled by. I enjoyed the magic system in here, and there's also one pretty badass character that I enjoy following. You do have multiple characters that you will follow throughout the story, but Donzo is kind of like your center point. Also, the main character that he comes across that is wielding this magic, she's a very peculiar person herself. So the next three books that I'm going to mention are adult, and they are rather hard-hitting and very impactful reads if you are looking for something like that. So the first book that I want to mention is An American Marriage. We are following this newlywed couple by the name of Celestial and Roy. They're traveling back home to meet Roy's parents in the countryside. On this trip back home, Celestial and Roy have to come to terms with some of the things that all newlyweds have to deal with, such as setting boundaries between parents-in-law, specifically how you're gonna handle the mother-in-law. And so they ultimately decide to stay at a hotel. Celestial and Roy get into a minor dispute, minor argument, and Roy actually leaves the room to kind of take a break, get a breather. Not soon after, he is arrested on charges of rape, and he is sentenced to prison for something that he did not do. Now this book is very peculiar from other books that you've heard like this, because you don't actually follow Roy's prison experience. You follow Roy's experience with the outside world, such as his family and his friends, and most importantly his wife. You follow their newlywed marriage as their trust and love and patience is put to the test. There are some pivotal and just like emotionally pulling moments when she comes to visit him in prison, and I can't put into words what this book did to me. Everybody else that I know that has read this book, we have all felt the same way. It was so real and so provoking and so like not triggering in like a bad way, but this is a book that will make you feel all of the feels and question what you think about marriages and how they maneuver one person being incarcerated and what is okay to do and what is not okay to do. The audiobook was so good. Like once I hit play, I was not able to stop at all, and I highly recommend this one. The next hard hitter I have is The Death of Vic OG. This follows a family, or like a set of people, most of them are family members, as they try to maneuver and deal with grief and loss around Vivek, who is a trans main character who has died. And so you open the book with the death of Vivek and how that resonates and just impacts everyone that was around them and just interacted with them, and how they have to deal with the loss of someone who represented so much in their life and signified so much about our society and how we currently treat trans main characters or just the LGBT community as a whole. Now this book is actually set in Nigeria, and that is where the author is from as well, and it is not exactly always tolerant towards the LGBT community, and that significantly ties into the storyline and the death around Vivek. But there's also other contributing factors such as like the social climate and just everything that's going on in Nigeria, and how the citizens are kind of forced to navigate that as well. Because this book opens with the death of someone, you follow and get to know Vivek through the POV of other people who knew them, and they just come to life off the page even though they're not necessarily there, and they're such a compelling character to follow. This is another book that will just pull all of the feels out of you. And then our last book that's kind of gonna stump you is a novella that was recently printed as a hardcover by Toni Morrison. This is her short story, one of two of her only short stories she has written, and that is Recitative. I'm so glad that I said that without like messing up the title. And we're following two girls. One is black, one is white. We don't know which is black and we don't know which is white. But essentially we follow Twyla and Roberta, and they meet at this orchard, and they kind of connect and form this bond because for whatever reason, one or another, neither of the girls' mothers is able to take care of them. So you see them at 3 other points throughout their life as they grow up, and every time they come in contact with one another, they are on opposite sides of different social issues, and also they're very different people every time they come in contact with one another. So this is a very short book. I think the short story is only 21 pages, and it's definitely one that's going to have your brain turning, it's going to have your thought wheels going, and it's a book that you kind of want to discuss with someone. And then the last book I want to talk about is a non-fiction that I had a crazy amount of time with. I have read so many feminist books that are very popular and always talked about, but they never really resonated with me, and so it started to make me think, like, am I really a part of the feminist movement? Because I have tried and like kind of DNF'd all of them because it never reflected a feministic movement that I felt was targeted towards me or reflected where I stood in the world, but this is one of them. Cecily Brown spoke so much truth. Like, this book is full of sermons, and I would preach it. I would get on a soapbox and I would preach directly from this Bible of feministic movement. Cecily grew up in Chicago, I believe, and she has had to navigate the world as an ordinary black woman. I mean, like, true black woman. Like, this book is something that I feel like everyone can relate to in some way, form, or fashion. If you are not a lover of nonfiction, or you're not a lover of like books that are around feminism, like if you were ever gonna try it, this was it, because the way that she talks to you is so candid and raw. Like, she is talking specifically to black women, and I'm just in awe that we now can get books like this that has such a targeted audience, and is appealing to like such a smaller amount of people. And it's actually something that she talks about towards the end of this book, about how she kept getting no from her publishers because it's a book about feminism, but it doesn't reflect mainstream feminism, and it doesn't include a wide range of women. And I'm just so glad that a publisher took a chance on her and put this book out there, because like this is the book of voices of women that was left behind out of the movement. The movement is now mainstream, and it doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening to black women, and she covers everything from us, like how we dress, having to have our hair laid, how much money we spend on getting our bodies done, trap music, how we're reflected in rap music, and how hard college can be for us. And just this book, again, like, get you a copy, because like if there was ever a black book, a book for black women, this is it. So the last 3 are just honorary mentions that are on my personal TBR to read really soon, and also before the year is out. The first one I have is New Age of Empire: How Racism and Colonialism Still Rules the World. This is actually not a book club pick for both me and Erin that we're going to be reading in the month of March. The live show will be over on Booked and Busy's channel, and so you guys should follow us on Instagram to watch out for our dates, but also track our channel, because we will do announcements and let you guys know when the live show for that date is. Reading a little bit of the synopsis, it says colonialism and imperialism are often treated as distant memories, whether glorified in collective nostalgia or taught as a sin of the past in history classes, but both are alive and well. Empire has merely taken a new form, one in which the US and not Europe is at the center of Western dominion, and imperial power looks more like racial capitalism than the expansion of colonial holdings. The International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and even the United Nations have become the new mechanisms of contemporary imperialism. Yet these tactics are not limited to just the West or to white people. The neo-colonial relationship between between China and Africa, for instance, continues the extractive imperial traditions into the 21st century. The author Andrews traces the foundation of power in the West to slavery, genocide, and colonialism, definitely explaining their intertwined histories. One of the things that really sold me on this book is the mention of the capitalistic relationship and neo-colonial relationship that China has with Africa. It's something that I have been personally following. I am intriguedly interested in it, and I've been able to explore it a little more in depth in my program since I am now in grad school and I study international relations, and so I am able to follow this on a personal level of just my personal interest, but also from a scholarly point. And so I am so glad and proud that we have a Black author that is also noticing things that are happening right now and how that ties into colonialism and ties into slavery and the shift in capitalism towards something that is directly related to racial disparity. And this book is something that I am extremely excited for, just for that alone, because usually when you have books that cover topics like this, it's always in hindsight. It's always, hey, this happened 10, 12, 20 years ago. Let's go back and dive into it. But this book is going to cover so much that happened in the past leading up to today. This is a new release that came out in the year of 2021. And as a historian, I love the history, but sometimes I'm tired of looking at the past and I want to talk about what's happening now and why it matters now, why we should do something about it now while we can, instead of looking back on the past. The next book that I grabbed is a new release and it was a pre-order. This is called The Violin Conspiracy. This is a Black thriller. I was very interested in this new release because we have some Black representation in the world of classical music, and even though I'm not really a music girl, especially not a classical music girl, I know how big that is and how much racism is inherent in things like classical music or ballet. We have a character whose dream is to be a classical violinist. They discover that one of their ancestors' violin or fiddle is actually worth $1 million or so, and so they use that to get their foot in the door in the world. And then at the eve of this upcoming competition, the violin is stolen and someone leaves a ransom note for $5 million. And there is a white family that is claiming to be the owner of this violin, and then we have Ray and his family who are also claiming that the violin is rightfully theirs because it was passed down from one of their ancestors. So the last book is a book that I'm pretty certain I will be reading in February, and that is The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. And this is a book that follows a family or a character and her family over several generations, and that is really all that I know. It is a very thick book, but it is historical fiction, which is something that I have been loving lately, and it is Black, and I've seen enough people rave about it for me to be like, okay, I'm interested in it. Those are all of the books I have for you guys today. If you are going to pick up any, let me know in the comment section below. Leave me a fist emoji, and I will see you guys next time. Have fun with the rest of your Black History Month.